Margie, I'm looking down here at my notes, and can I just jump forward to 1995? In 95, you left Brazil for a 2-year ministry experience back here in the Los Angeles area. And it was providential that an intercongregational group of religious sisters were scouting, and 2 religious to help. They were looking for religious to launch an inner city project that later became South Central Los Angeles Ministry, the acronym SCLAMP, Southern California or South Central LAMP. You and another sister applied, and you were hired to do that analysis of the neighborhood and to find out what might be helpful to the people in that area of Los Angeles who had tremendous needs. So could you talk a little bit about that project and your part in it, in dealing with the people there?
I think a big part of that, I have to back up a little bit, a big part of that was the introduction I had with my experiences in Sao Paulo after 15 years in the interior of Brazil, the small little country towns that were, some of them only 5 years old when we got there. I went to Sao Paulo, which is the big metropolis, and I spent 3.5 years in Sao Paulo with the Maryknoll sisters and priests and brothers and lay people. I heard about them coming to Brazil, and I met some of them at a meeting we had up in Miracema, and I decided, since I always wanted to go to Maryknoll, I would get a little bit of Maryknoll in on my life's experiences. So I asked if I could go and spend some time in Sao Paulo and join the order there, this group of missionaries. Most of them are American. One was from Ecuador. And work with them in a big metropolis, because the only experience I had of Brazil was small towns, and you don't get a full Brazilian culture experience in just the boondocks up in the north, the interior. Sao Paulo would be a more metropolis, and I would have a lot more experiences there. So I did, and that was a wonderful couple of years. And I spent a lot of that too with the Maryknoll sisters, who were also had some feminist groups. We got women together, and we did a lot of the creation spirituality subjects in Portuguese with these women's groups, and also with the other missionaries. It was a wonderful experience because I was with not only priests and sisters, but with married lay people who had children. Children were part of their missionary life. They would come, and some of them would actually come pregnant, or they'd have their children there, or they'd come with children that were in their late teens. And it was wonderful to be able to be on a social level, and we would get together for prayers and discussions on all the aspects of Brazilian life and pastoral ministry with this group of Maryknoll. So that was wonderful. And I think that right there prepared me for South Central LAMP, because one thing led into another. I had the experience with women's groups. I had the experience with the lay people. I had experience in Sao Paulo too with different Christian communities. There were small basic communities who were either building their little churches or chapels and needed someone to help them accompany that and learn how to be leaders in their communities.
Could you speak about South Central LAMP and how, make concretize
Yes.
what that was and what you did with the other sister there, okay?
The other side of South Central LAMP was that it also was intercongregational. There were 8 religious orders who began South Central LAMP, and it was the Sisters of Sacred Heart, RSHM, who sold some of their property and had this money to invest, and wanted, because of the Los Angeles riots, wanted to invest that money in some project down in the inner city in Los Angeles. So they gathered some other religious orders that also would support the same idea, and they set up a board, but they hadn't a notion yet or could not concretize what they actually wanted to do, the actual project, the actual program. So they wanted to hire 2 sisters, and I had heard about this when I was in Brazil, and I got the information, and someone of our sisters here said, why don't you apply for this? And I said, well, gosh, I don't know anything about Los Angeles inner city, and I don't know, but it sounds interesting, and I like the idea of intercongregational, working with other sisters. So I did apply, and myself and another sister of social service, Yoli Vega, was hired. We were hired. I think we were the only 2 that actually applied. I'm not sure if there were anybody else.
Well, they got
Because
2 good people.
it was an open-ended project. Like they just hired us and said, now go and find something for us to put our money into and to build. And we said, what? You have no idea? Well, we have an idea. We want maybe concentrate on women and children, on the Hispanic, Latino culture that's there in Los Angeles, something that would be in the educational department or whatever. And they said, you'll have about a year to do an inventory or to do some scouting. So with that little tiny bit, and remember, I didn't know even how to drive around Los Angeles. From the San Fernando Valley, you would never go to Los Angeles. But Yoli, thank God, she did. She had been working in the area as a secretary to a lawyer, and she knew the area. She was Hispanic. She has Mexican-American, so she had the Spanish. I had the Portuguese, which later became Portunal, Spanish-Portuguese. And luckily, we didn't know each other, but we jived. It worked out well. And she was kind of reserved and quiet and timid, and I was loud Italian, ready to take on anything from my missionary experience in Brazil.
Could you move forward to what
So-
you found out and what
so
happened with that?
af-
What you decided and was agreed upon?
After the year of scouting and walking the streets and knocking on doors, churches and health posts and hospitals and political figures, we went everywhere and anywhere. We went to the gangs, we went to all kinds of different churches and asked these questions: what is the need? What is the need? What is the need? We got back and we saw 4 needs. Out of the 4 needs, we looked at what we could actually do, because I didn't know anything about gangs or drugs, and nursing or medical field was not also in play. So we dwelt on something to do with education, and we saw that there was a problem with probably most of the women and their small children in the area who were trying to get their children to be successful in grade school. That came about in many different ways. And luckily we heard about a program in San Antonio, Texas, that was a parenting program, which on the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, December 12th, was directed to us. A friend of Yoli's told her about this course, and we asked the board if we could go, and they did let us. We did do the course. We found it excellent. The curriculum books were just perfect, and we brought that back to the board, and they hemmed and hawed because it was a very expensive curriculum. It was an expensive project, but they said, okay, we'll go for it. Then we had to go and try to get the women. So we would go back to these health posts and back to the schools and back to the churches, hand out brochures to say we were beginning this parenting program, and it's in Spanish and English, and would you like to come? It's free, and this is the way it's going to work. So finally, little by little, we got some women to come, and then those women, by word of mouth, told their friends, and we were able to get the project going in 1996, I think. We actually started the project, and we had another problem. We had no place for it. The social service sisters at the time had a wonderful, huge, I think 3, 4, 5-story building on Figueroa and Adams, where they had their administration and where they had some of their ill sisters or recuperating sisters. So they had some extra room there, and they allowed us to use one room in the bottom floor and an outside, like a garage at the back, and the yard, and the dining room where we were able to use that as well. So we got to use that for about a year or two. So it was a wonderful thing because we had absolutely no sight. We had no place to put our bags or our hats or whatever while we were doing the interviews. So it was, social service sisters couldn't have been better in their generosity, and also their spirit of hope for us that things would get better, and that they really, their faith that the project was worth it. And the board would actually meet in an older house of theirs that was right next door. So it was a wonderful opportunity. The parenting program had the women from the neighborhood that could walk because or take a bus because these people wouldn't have cars. And they would come with their children between 0 and, I think it was either 0 and 4 or 0 and 6 years of age. And they would bring the children with them, and we would have someone take care of the children, babies at the time as well, in one area. And since the women and children were on the same site, we didn't have to have different hygiene and medical and laws to say, we could do this, yeah. So we were able to get it going that way, and the women we would take for different classes in English also, and in parenting. And we would also have educational toys that they could make for their children and take them home with them and teach the children their colors, their numbers, various aspects of what a child would need to know before entering kindergarten and first grade. So it was a huge success. It is still a success. It is over 20 years old. It is still going strong, always financially dependent on fundraising. Our first Christmas, we went to a 99-cent store and picked up a few little items to give the children. And we said, we can't just continue this, because the next year there was even a double amount of children and women. So that's where I brought the Buttitta family involved, especially my brother Chuck and Mike one year as well. They were in LAPD working, and they agreed to to help us out with the children's gifts for Christmas, which is still going on, thank God. And I thank the LAPD, and especially my brothers. And even my mother got involved by looking up items in the penny saver. My cousin got involved by picking up these items so we'd get them cheaper. My older brother would get involved by coming to set up for graduation, and it was a wonderful time. And thank God the program is still going very well. And the idea of having the congregations, intercongregational aspect of it on the board has also been a very big plus, because more and more today, intercongregational projects are the way to go, helping the other, and trying to come together and learn from each other and put efforts, our small resources together. So that was wonderful.
After that project got off the ground, you went back?
Yes, I was hired for 2 years. And after 2 years, because the project was so young, they said, you can't leave after 2 years. And my partner, Yoli, said, you can't leave after 2 years. So I decided that I would stay another 2 years. Another reason for coming was that I would give some extra time to my mother. After being away in Brazil for that many years, I decided it would be nice to be near to her. And at that time, my father had died. He died back in 1981. I was still in Brazil at the time. And my mother was in pretty good health. So it was nice to be able to live in Palisades with our sisters and commute to LA, downtown LA, and then come back to Thousand Oaks and visit with my mother every other weekend. So that was wonderful. So she loved that. But then after the 4 years, I decided, I did a 2-year direction and decided no, I wasn't really finished with Brazil. That was hard. My mother found it hard. She never ever stood in my way, but I could see I could see the tears in her eyes that she was wishing I would have decided to stay. But it was time to go, and I don't regret going back. I had to give Brazil a little more time and closure. And when I went back to Brazil, as you see, I went back to Goiânia.
Mm-hmm. I am, during the last 14 years in Brazil, you were in Goiânia.
Yes.
Which is a large city in the interior, and it drew most of its population growth from the construction of the nearby capital, Brasilia.
Brasilia.
Together with some of our sisters, you administered to several residential communities, clusters that were there in that area. And you taught arts and crafts, and you supported activities at the HIV/AIDS program. And you began a women's group. And for the last 5 years, you joined a religious intercongregational missionary group that accompanied families who had been unjustly removed from their settlements. So what stands out for you among some of these ministries? And how did our St. Louis charism play a part in that ministry?
Yes, going back to Brazil, it was difficult because I really enjoyed my time in the north. I enjoyed my time in Sao Paulo. I loved the interaction and new experiences of Los Angeles and the inner city ministry. And going back to Brazil, I was kind of glad to be back, but then where now? And how it's like, it was like beginning again. I had so many beginnings. Beginning, first of all, in the high school here, brand new girls' high school. Beginning in the novitiate here. Beginning the mission. Beginning again in a metropolis like Sao Paulo, a completely different aspect of what I had been used to in the north of Brazil. So it was difficult. I had to hem and haw a lot and say, well, now where can I go? Goiânia was built for about maybe 50,000, but it's tripled now because it was only 2 hours from the new capital in Brasilia that was built in 1960. So Goiânia has boomed, and it has grown faster than they can keep up with it. So there are a lot of settlements on the outskirts of Goiânia, and there's a huge housing problem, because people are coming in from the interior, coming in from the farms, coming in from a different lifestyle and into a city that would be, I couldn't say how big it would be in comparison to any of our cities here, but it could possibly be something like a San Diego. And these people were also coming in from a different lifestyle. And at the time, a lot of religious orders began in the big city like Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro. We did the opposite. We began in the interior, in a farming area, cattle raising, small towns. And it was actually better in a way because in Sao Paulo, as well as in Goiânia, we could understand where the people were coming from. We knew they were coming from a farming background, a small town interior background, and we understood what they were missing and how difficult it was for them to understand and get involved in the culture of a larger city. So for us it worked better because we had that understanding.
Could you speak directly about the settlements? And could you
Yes.
speak about how your ministry lived out our charism in this regard?
Yes, because the people who came wanted to set up a home. So they would try to find an area that they could build on. And they would get assurance from these political figures in the area who said, yes, you can settle here, don't worry about it. We'll vote for us. This is what always happens. Vote for us, take on our party, and we will get you where you have to go. Well, that didn't work, because what happened was a lot of them were misled, and a lot of these political figures were just using the people. So in one instant, the very last experience that I had was with a group of, they must have been maybe, I'd say, over 1,000 families who decided to settle in this one area, which was outside of this city center of Goiânia, and they built their little homes. And after I don't know how many years, the woman who actually owned the land, who actually never paid any taxes all those years, over 50 years of no tax paying, she kind of was out of the picture. And all of a sudden, when she saw these homes being built on her land, she got upset and got some lawyers and whatever, paid a lot of political figures off. And to make a long story short, the people were taken off the land in a very violent way. And they were put into two sports arenas where they were put up for a couple of months, side by side on mattresses. Their homes, that some of them were built even with bricks and mortar, were leveled. They could get some of their furniture and things out, but imagine how much money they put into that building. Then there was no really strategic plan for these families. Some of them who had relatives could send their children to the relatives while this was going on. But if they left the sports arena and left the whole project, they would never have been able to apply for a home later on. They were promised that they would be built a home to replace the home that was ruined, destroyed. So these people had to stay in these terrible conditions and file for their homes and file for what they had a right to. And after that, a couple of months, they were put into another field with black plastic homes, plastic dwellings. And no structure at all there. But if they left that, they still would not have. So they had to stay with it for like 2-3 years, living under those conditions, terrible, unsanitary conditions, until they got their homes. Finally, their homes were built. They were like little dog houses in another area, pretty far outside of the city limits. And no schools around, no shopping, nothing. They had to get buses to get into any area that they could do some shopping and even send their children to school. So these 1,000 or so families were moved then from the imprisoned area of the sports arenas to a large field where they set up black plastic tents for them to live in. Again, the families who were able to ship their children to other relatives or friends did so, but a lot of them did not have that opportunity, so the children were actually there in the tents with their parents, who were not able to leave because if they left, they would also lose out on the promised homes that they were going to eventually move into. And that took a couple of years. This is when I heard, well, actually, I visited some of the families when I was in the little church community in Goiânia, and the sports arena was just down the road from us. So I visited some of them there, and I was shocked to see the terrible, unhealthy climate that they were in. And then I decided I would follow up on that, and the Religious Conference of Women also put a advertisement out to try to get religious women to help with this plight of these settling families, and they asked for religious of any of the congregations. So a couple of the religious did apply, and I met with them, and they explained the situation, and I decided I would go and be part of this team. So we were actually an intercongregational, international religious women's group. We also opened it up for men, but we never got any of the men to come, any of the brothers or priests or lay people. So we were 5 different congregations, and we got on very well and decided how we would strategize and accompany these families. The families soon did get their little homes. They were tiny, tiny little homes, 2 bedrooms, a little tiny living room and kitchen in one, and a tiny bathroom. They were very cheaply built. They were very close to one another. They had tiny, tiny little room where they could add on maybe a little bit to their homes. But these people had, the Catholic population had no church. They had a lot with a tent on it. Some of the other churches used homes and reassembled the home to be their little church, which was actually illegal, but they got away with it. The Catholic community didn't want to do that because they wanted an actual church. To this day, the Catholic population of this area, which is called Real Conquista, Real Conquest, is the name of the group of people that were moved. They have not had a church. They have not even begun to build their church because a rich family has decided they would help, but the family doesn't want to help unless they have the clear documentation. I worked a lot with some of the people to get the documentation. We thought we had everything, and then something else would be missing. So to this day, they are still waiting for this little church. This is over 10 years now. They still assemble in a little tiny tent, sometimes in the homes. Some of the other community churches there have tiny little churches built, but nobody has really been given an area to build an actual large church. And some of the Protestant churches don't want to see the Catholic Church build a big church there. So we have some of those political elements in play, and that's how come we're still not being able to get all the documentation. It's a terrible political fight. We have the archdiocese, the bishop. We have him behind us. We have the governor behind us who has asked that this be done too, but something gets overridden every single time. The other thing, there was no school. They finally do have a little elementary school, and there was no child care. They do now have a child care nursery. There's still no high school, so the high school students have to be bussed out every day, and they have to go and fight to get on and off these buses, which are sometimes violently taken over by some of the gangs in the area. The drug trafficking in this area is just skyrocketed because they're people that don't have good jobs, or they don't have transport to their jobs. It's a very, very precarious, very depressing, delayed reaction of the government to really do something for these people. The resilience of the Brazilian people is wonderful, though. The Catholic community is still very earnest about meeting under their tent every Sunday, and we have our baptisms, and we have the confirmations and whatever else that goes on. Some of the oblate priests come and say Mass, but it is very difficult. We set up a women's group as well, and we do arts and crafts. We did arts and crafts with them and some sewing projects. We try to visit families, give them support through visiting. All through missionary work in Brazil, visits were the primary beginning work that we did. even in the very, very, very beginning years. It was important to get out to the families, to visit them, to see them in their homes, to listen to them, listen and be part of them. In the beginning, we wanted to do more of the pastoral work. They wanted us in schools, so we listened to them. We began working in some of the schools to help, and then decided we would keep doing both. One helped the other because of language, but visiting is still very, very important, and they treat you like a king and a queen when you visit their home. And that's no matter if they're a different religion, no matter what their stance in life, they are honored to have you visit their homes. They feel that, especially a foreigner too, to come and visit their home, it makes them feel just wonderful. But little by little, the structures are getting set up in Real Conquista. I do keep contact with some of the people there, and the little group of religious are still working side by side with the people there. And hopefully, things will get better. There's so much to do, and it's very hard to do. It's very hard to see results, to do anything quickly. Like I said, I spent months, a year, probably a year and a half, just going back and forth to these offices for home security and council, government agencies, trying to get our documents done and trying to understand what the holdup was. It's very, very, very depressing. But the people just keep at it, and they know that someday they will have their church and their center, the community center. It's amazing how so many of them will give us their front porch to be able to do a course or to be able to set up a women's group. They'll build a little kind of a shack with a simple roof on it so that we can use their area of the house to do some work. One of the sisters also helped with Pastoral da Criança, which is a national pastoral preventative care for children and their mothers. So that's a wonderful thing that's going on, and they're doing it just in the little areas that they can find to do in some people's homes. So I do want to go back a little bit and talk a bit about the povo brasileiro, the Brazilian people, because I think it's very, very important that they are people full of life, very, very hospitable. They love celebration, no matter how sick or how downtrodden they are or how poor. They are very welcoming for celebration. They are very happy within themselves. You can go into homes and they are just so proud to give you a banana or a box of matches or something, and you take that in a very generous spirit from them, because it's all that they have to give you, and they'll definitely give. You could go into some of the richer families in some of the other areas of Goiânia or Brazil, and they wouldn't give you a toothpick, which is always is amazing. The poorer they are, the more generous they are. Their sense of humor is wonderful. They can laugh at themselves, and they also laugh at us because of some of the things we do or say. But they're not laughing at us, they're laughing with us. And people aren't oriented, their people are oriented not to things, but to friendship. Things aren't a big deal for them. When we were in the north in the beginning years, there was no water, no television, no radio, no electricity, you name it, we didn't have it. But if somebody who was brought up on all those things, I never missed it. The people substitute for, all of those things that we have here. We actually saw television coming in Colmeia, one day to another. One family and then another family would get a small television, and it was wonderful in one sense, but terrible in another sense, because the people wouldn't gather together in the evening after their dinner, or gather together on the streets and in the parks, the little park benches or whatever, because they'd all be rushing home now to see this box. And it was a stark difference between not having TV and then having TV come in. Their houses were very simple. They didn't go in for a lot of luxuries. They didn't go in for a lot of fixing up of their homes. They were simple and served what they needed. And then when they saw the houses on television and saw more consumeristic, capitalistic type of things, they started wanting, and of course then, you know, violence starts, and they wanted to better their homes even if they didn't have the money. And so it was amazing to see all that, see it all. Family was very important. A lot of them would bring children up that weren't their own children. You'd ask them, how many children do you have? And they'd say, God gave me 3 and I took 4 more. And they would, no adoption papers, no adoption process. They would just take these children who were left orphaned or whose parents weren't able to take them or bring them up, and they would just take them in as part of their family, and there was no big deal about it. It's amazing. It's amazing. They were patient. They have a huge capacity for waiting. In fact, we always heard that delay is a climate in Brazil. You can't really time them and fix them to a time. If a meeting begins at 1, they'll be there sometime between 1:30 and 2. When the time changes between old time and new time, you'd say, okay, the celebration in church is going to be at 8 today, and they'd say, is that the old time or the new time? And we'd say, no, it's not old or new, it is the time. 8 o'clock, be there. But they would never. Nothing ever began at the right time. There was a wonderful religious spirituality to them, and these are people that would not have had religious education. A lot of them wouldn't have education. A lot of the women that were in some of my groups, the lay women, would only have to the 4th or 6th grade education. A lot of people in the interior, especially in the country communities, would never had catechism classes or anything structural about their religion, but their spirituality was 10 times more than mine was. I learned more from them, and their beautiful, I think their connection, this is another thing that Creation Spirituality Sabbatical brought out, their connection with creation, with the land, with the environment, with the trees and the plants and everything around them, their environment, was their spirituality. It was part of their spirituality. And that was always beautiful, and I could really see that working in so many of them. They were hard workers, because a lot of my students in Barhalanja and Colbeia, they would be working in the little stores and banks all day long. They would come at 6 o'clock at night and study till 11. And these are just young teenagers who wanted an education but also needed a little job. So it was something to see how hardworking they were, and that they valued education. They really valued education, and their parents valued education, because in most cases their parents wouldn't have had an education, a formal education. They were motivated. They were very proud, very good sportsmen. Very, very creative. I had them for a lot of arts and crafts, and it amazed me. You just had to show them a picture of something without the directions, they could imitate it. And you could show somebody, a woman, a dress that you wanted, and she, without even doing much in the measurements or a pattern, would turn that dress out. I mean, they were very, very creative, very artistic people. And the cultures in Brazil, when I used to show pictures of Brazilian people, people would say, well, they're not very dark. And I'd say, well, what do you mean dark? Americans have a thing about color. And in Brazil, it is multicolored. We have African Americans, African Brasileiros, I should say. We have the indigenous, down from the Incas, the famous Incas and Aztecs and Mayas. We have Japanese. One of the largest Japanese population outside of Japan is in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. We have Dutch up in the northeast. And then we have different cultures coming in, Iranians and Lebanese. We have, it's a beautiful, beautiful mixture of people. So their colors are a rainbow of color. You could see a child going down the street that looked very white with red hair and freckles, and then see 2 or 3 tones of other children in different colors of black, African. We have Italian, German. Italian and German is very prominent in the south. And then the Portuguese from Portugal. So it is a beautiful combination of cultures. And I think that's why people talk a lot about the beauty of Brazilian women. That's where the beauty comes from. The more beautiful a woman is, you can see how many races she is comprised of. And one last thing I want to just talk about is what they call the corazon de caipira. And I think this goes back to the Northeast, to the North boondocks, the interior. Corazon is heart. Caipira is like a farm person, a person of the land. And it's an open heart. The people are open-hearted. They'll listen and they'll take it in, and you can really tell they're listening and they're taking it in. They're not shutting you off because you're some white person coming in, from a rich country or whatever. They'll open their hearts to you, and it's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor for open heart who is generous and welcoming and listening. They have a great capacity for all of that. Thinking it then back, what stands out about my ministry and how our St. Louis charism has played a part in it, I think we talk about it in our assemblies now and in our chapters, the solidarity with the marginalized. That has been part of our missionary experience. Women and children, because the women are some of the leaders of the society, and the women who have a nurturing effect on their children. The unity in the small basic communities where people can feel like one. That's missing in a lot of areas where people don't feel part of a group, part of oneness with others. And I think we had that in some of the small basic church communities. And transform unjust structures. You can do so much of that, but you are a presence, and you help put a lot of transformation in process. They have to do it themselves, though. I think you can't do for them. And I did a course for marginalized prostitutes in the Bahia, San Salvador. One of the things that was always, always repeated, you cannot take someone out of. You can't take someone out of prostitution. You can't take someone out of drugs. You can't take someone out of whatever. You can't do it for them. You have to do it with them. And I think that was really repeated so many times. You have to help, but help alongside them. And the same with this quote that comes from 700 BC, Lao China or something, China. And it says, go to the people, live with them, learn from them, love them. Start with what they know. Build with what they have. But with the best leaders, when the work is done, the people, or the task accomplished, the people will say, we have done this ourselves. I think you have to make that evident, that they actually do it themselves. They have to bring themselves out of that poverty. They have to bring themselves out of that unjust structure. They have to work with the elements to bring themselves up, but you work alongside them. So our founder, the World Healed, Unified, and Transformed, I can now look back and see how so many of the elements of my experiences in Brazil have worked on that, and have been mirrored in some of those charisms that our congregation is now studying more and trying to build as a permanent structure within our lives. And you have a
Yes, I do.
last little question, I
I
know.
don't know how little it is, but in April of 2015, Margie, you decided to return to California and to meet a new challenge here at Louisville Convent and Community and begin a new ministry in the Regional Archives for California. How have those years in mission ministry prepared you for this new home mission?
Well, looking back on all these years, I was approximately 38 years in mission in Brazil, with 4 years out for South Central Lamp in Los Angeles. But looking back through the years, I was actually prepared very little for everything I did.
So you're fine for this.
Pioneers are usually not too prepared. So when I decided it was time to leave Brazil, Brazil Mission is not going to grow. We still have 2 sisters there. They are doing wonderful work in the Center for HIV and AIDS. And I did what I could, and I found it was time, because of age and also wanting to re-enter here in an aspect of ministry that I could still be young enough to grapple with. I decided it was time to come back to the United States. It was very difficult. I was not ready in some ways. I had left a lot undone. Nothing ever gets completely done. I was sad about it. I did do some preparation for my return over 2 years, but it did feel right, and I'm glad I did it. When I came here, I was going to wait a while and get involved and re-enter and then find a ministry that would be suitable for me. But when I came to Louisville Convent and saw some of our sisters here, and some of them retired, some of them recuperating, some of them ill, I decided, let me see what I can do here on the home front, which I haven't done in all those years that I was away, to participate here in the region and to participate with some of our sisters who have real needs here. I said to myself, why go and look for a ministry when maybe God's ministry, the one He's showing me, is right here at home? So I started to live here with the sisters in the convent here. And the sister who had the archives died about a couple of months before I came back here. Never dreamt that I would be involved in all of the archives here. I said I would do a little bit with Liz, who had died, and incorporate the Brazilian archives, which I was taking care of in Brazil in a very simple way, but never expected that I would be landed with the archives here. I am very happy about it. I'm still bewildered. It is overwhelming at times, but it's a challenge, and like all the other challenges I've had in my life, the Lord will see me through. So I am very happy to be here, and when it is time, I will find another ministry outside of here, preferably maybe with some kind of arts and crafts with children or underprivileged children. I would like to do that, or with some women's groups. I'll let the Lord help me choose that. And eventually I do want to do some of my own art. I've always done art from the very, very beginning, even in the grade schools here before I went to Brazil. I've done arts and crafts with all ages. I love that, but I've never given time for my own art and my own pursuits. It could be in the area of clay or painting or drawing or mixed media, whatever. I'd like to pursue that and find a little corner here at Louisville where I can do that. But for now, I enjoy decorating the dining room, and I enjoy being with the sisters and helping in any way I can, and trying to sort through the many riches we have here in the archives of our region.
Well, Margie, I really, really want to thank you for the richness of the tapestry of the stories that you've woven and the sharing that you've done today. The stories of our mission in Brazil, a story of your own faith lived out, the charism unfleshed in the ways in which you ministered in Brazil, your faith and your resilience and your sense of humor and your your wonderful sharing here today. Thank you so very, very much, Margie.
You're welcome. And we'll have to have a second interview with just fun things about our experiences and my experiences. Many, many, many stories that eventually will come out too in the written word. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.